Discovering the Spanish Cuisine, Food and Culture Presentation by Lindsay Porter. The learning objectives of this presentation are first to discover the traditional foods and dishes of the Spanish cuisine. Second, we want to identify current eating patterns and the health beliefs of the Spanish. Then we want to compare the food practices of those living in Spain to those Spanish Americans that are living in the United States today. And then finally, evaluate any potential nutritional concerns of the Spanish diet and lifestyle. So as we know, Spain is surrounded by water. And so naturally they have a Mediterranean diet. They cook a lot with olive oil, garlic, and herbs. Fruits and vegetables make up a large percentage of the diet. Also legumes, nuts, cheeses. They also do love meat. They like the seafood is very popular, all different kinds of seafood, pork, beef, lamb, chicken. And it's important to note that the regional foods vary quite a bit by geographic location, the weather, and also the ethnic background of those that live in the area. Here are a few of the traditional dishes that can be found in many parts of Spain. These include paella, which is a rice dish that has vegetables, meat, and seafood all mixed together. It's very popular. Families might eat a version of this almost every day. They also have cocido, which is a kind of stew, and this is very popular as well. This comes with meat, sometimes noodles, vegetables, all different kinds of things can be mixed together with a broth. Another really popular item is the tortilla española, which is a Spanish omelet. That can be made with fried potatoes, eggs, and olive oil in a skillet. They fry that and flip it over and serve it hot. They also love their jamón, which is cured ham. That's very prized and Spanish favorite, and the Spanish are willing to pay extra for high quality meats. They also have chorizo, which is pork sausage made with paprika. That's probably the most popular type of sausage. They also have something they call gazpacho, which is a tomato-based soup. It's very light and healthy and usually served cold. In fact, sometimes they put it in a glass to serve so they can drink it. Cheese is another important part of the diet. All kinds, soft cheeses, aged cheeses, blue cheese, all kinds are eaten in Spain. And fresh fruits are usually served for dessert. Sometimes those are served with cheese as well. And coffee, wine, and horchata are probably the most common drinks. Wine being probably the most common. They drink that mostly with every meal. Coffee, of course, is usually in the morning, but wine is a big part of their diet. So many of the holidays and special occasions that take place in Spain are centered around the Catholic religion. So of course they celebrate Easter, and most families will eat lamb and the sweetbread they make that has a lot of yeast in it. Both of those things are symbolic of the events that happen at Easter. Christmas is also celebrated. Turrón is an almond dessert that's made, and most families will eat that on Christmas Eve. Usually during Christmas Eve and Lent, some families will abstain from meat for religious reasons. Many families celebrate, or it's very popular for all Spanish to celebrate individual saints' days. They're even more popular than birthdays, and also baptisms and weddings. And these events are celebrated with special dishes. Although they are quite similar to the daily dishes, they just have extra, more elaborate ingredients. Families will also host a meal after a funeral. This is becoming less common though. So the traditional eating patterns in Spain include kind of an interesting timing of meals. They start out with a desayuno, which is a light continental breakfast, usually just coffee, maybe a churro, which is fried dough, sometimes chocolate, but a lot of Spanish don't eat breakfast at all. So some people take what they call an almuerzo, which is a mid-morning snack, again a coffee break to hold them over before lunch. Then lunch, which is called comida, is the largest meal of the day. And this usually begins around 2 p.m. It starts with a course of salad and soup, followed by meat, either the rice dishes or the stews that we talked about. They'll have that, and then a lot of times they'll have fruit for dessert. This can take an hour or more. They just relax and visit and have what they call sobremesa, which is table talk. And the Spanish also have some time to take the famous Spanish siesta nap. Although as the country, as more people are working further from home, that doesn't always happen as often, but they still have a good long, usually 2.5 hour lunch break. So a lot of families will go home and eat together. Later in the afternoon, they'll have what they call la merienda, which is an afternoon snack, and this sometimes will take the place of dinner for some families, but dinner is usually later, and that's from 9 to 10 at night. And it's a lighter meal, just one course and maybe dessert. And they will stay and visit, and sometimes it's not uncommon to find families, even with young children, that are up eating around midnight. Tapas are one of the most famous dishes of Spain, and these are Spanish appetizers. They're served throughout the day. They can be things like thin slices of cured meats, cheeses, olives, fried squid, all different things. So as we said, the Spanish love to cook with olive oil, and they use herbs and all kinds of different spices, but garlic is probably the most prevalent. They also roast and saute, grill, and fry their foods, but rarely bake, steam, or broil them. Families and groups of friends usually eat together, and so they'll eat from a shared platter, and also they'll have bread and with most meals, and they also, of course, have forks, knives, and napkins. The traditional health beliefs of Spain are also centered around Catholicism. They believe in the purity of water. They also feel that olive oil is symbolic as well as a remedy to lower cholesterol. They drink a lot of red wine because they believe that helps maintain and protect and restore health. Wine is a big part of their culture. They have something called agua de Carmen, which is another remedy made with alcohol, and they believe that it would treat stomach problems. Years ago, I don't know how much is practiced today, but they also have something called galena, which is a kind of fish, and that's thought to protect health, but only eaten on Ash Wednesday. So when we look at the current intakes and kind of their overall diet, we can see that they're very high in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, even get pretty high fish intake, very low in saturated fat, although they do eat quite a bit of red meat and processed meats. They have a very high unsaturated fat intake and consume a lot of olive oil. Almost every meal is made with oil, and a study said that a Spaniard on average will consume almost 10 liters of olive oil in a year. And they have a very low to moderate dairy intake and a moderate alcohol intake, but they are drinking a little bit less than they did 50 years ago. When we look at the current food practices in Spain today, they still, a lot of families will buy fresh produce from local markets just in their neighborhoods and on the streets coming home from work and school. And they mostly cook and eat at home. They eat together with their families for most meals. Again, that's changing a little bit just with the further commutes and schedules. It's a little bit harder to always be together, but they usually do that. There are set eating times. As we said, everything shuts down to give them enough time to socialize and rest, especially during the lunch hour. And so businesses will close, and they can just enjoy a nice, relaxing eating environment. Another important thing about their food practice to know is that the tourism drives the food and wine industry. And there are sometimes more tourists in the country, or almost as many tourists as there are native residents. So that's a big part of their culture. They also have large food and wine exports. They produce more olive oil than any other country in the world, and so that's a large part of their economy. They also have more supermarkets now than they used to. They're starting to compete a little bit with the local markets. So this is starting a possible trend away from eating as closely, or is following the Mediterranean diet. Some of those in the younger generation are eating a little bit less fruits and vegetables, more processed foods, a little more Western style diet. And for this reason, researchers are expecting obesity rates to start rising in this country. And in fact, the World Health Organization expects that maybe half of the Spaniards will be obese by 2030. So the current food practice in the United States for Spanish Americans are quite different than most people living in Spain. A lot of Spanish Americans, as expected, have adopted the American diet and lifestyle. The faster pace of the American lifestyle has led to less cooking time. We don't really have any set eating times compared to those in Spain. Fresh produce is a little bit more expensive here in the United States, and so it's led to a lower intake of fruits and vegetables. So there are some nutritional concerns, even though the Mediterranean diet overall is very healthy and is important in reducing the risk for all kinds of diseases, but overall it's really good. But we can see particularly in the Spanish, they do have a higher processed meat and red meat consumption than it's probably healthy. Another concern is they have little or no breakfast, and so they're not getting the nutrients they need in the morning, and that could be problematic just for energy levels, and just may not be the best thing for them. They also eat quite late. As we know, they can be up until having dinner at midnight, and not only is this might be a little bit hard on their systems, but they also might have less sleep, and that can interfere sometimes with overall diet and food cravings, things like that might have an impact. And the other concerns we talked about is the supermarkets are increasing. That may create a problem for more people might be getting more packaged foods and less fresh produce from their local markets. So some things to consider with the culture of Spain when you're doing counseling would probably be, one of the main things is that if these Spanish people have come to the United States, they may now lack the families and social support they had in Spain. The family social network, it's so important in Spain. Families are very close-knit. A lot of times the kids will live at home for up through their late 20s, and they even after being married and things, they return back and live close by family, so that parents and grandparents are involved with the children. So it might be important to make sure they have a strong social support in the United States. Another factor is that it's more expensive to purchase produce in the United States, so that'd be important to keep in mind. Let them know that they can, ways of keeping their same diet and being able to afford that at the same time would be important. It's also important to remember that eating is such a social event, and maybe when helping them with their dieting or eating patterns, that will be an important factor to best create a diet plan for them. They're also accustomed to eating very slowly, and it might be difficult for them to adapt to the American diet, or American lifestyle, I should say, but which is, hopefully they don't. Hopefully they can continue to eat on with go on with their regular eating habits, but that might be something to keep in mind, as well as they also feel it's important to not waste their food, so they will eat their entire meal and sometimes give the leftovers they'll make again the next day, or else, and finally give the scraps and things like that to their pets. So these are some of the things that we consider in counseling. And here are my references for this presentation. Thanks for watching.